Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Christmas Puddings and Wine Workshop. My name's Emma. I'm one of the Tastings and Events Managers, and Gil and I, another Tasting and Events Manager, are delighted that so many of you have been able to join us this evening. So we've got our desserts lined up, and we really hope that you have as well. Please do let us know what you're trying and how it's working out for you as well. So the lineup is, in theory, but obviously it's up to you guys as well. We've got trifle to start, followed by the cheese, and then there's a Christmas pudding, a Yule log, and then probably a lie down. But we do hope that whatever you're tucking into, whatever you have in front of you, you enjoy. And we'd really love to hear what you think of the combination, and also what your personal Christmas food and wine traditions are as well. For all of this, please do use the chat feature. Make sure that you put it to everyone and not just us, because I'm sure everybody'd love to hear what you have to say. Alternatively, if you have any questions, please do use the Q&A tab to submit these. This way they remain front and center, and we'll try and get to as many as possible throughout the event. So keep them coming. If you experience any connectivity problems or technical issues, please get in touch with us and we will, well, I say we, Gil, will try and resolve the issue. As Gil knows, I'm a complete technophobe. You can contact us via email on tastings@thewinesociety.com, or within Zoom, you can click on the reactions tab and raise your hands or message us directly using the chat feature. A couple of facts in inverted commas, to start us over before I pass over to Gil, who will start the proceedings about talking about sherry and trifle. In 1644, Parliament banned Christmas feasting, decreeing that Christmas should be a day of fasting. Fortunately, in 1714, King George I re-established Christmas pudding as part of the Christmas meal, and we've never looked back. Slightly darker one, Santa Claus eats an enormous amount of calories on Christmas Eve. He consumes roughly 71.2 billion calories, which apparently would take him over 100 years to work off. So in terms of cookies and milks, he eats one cookie, drinks one glass of milk at each of the roughly 395 million homes he visits. This adds up to 30.9 billion calories from cookies and 40.4 billion calories from milk. I'm not up there with that number, so I'm feeling quite content with myself. The UK, on the other hand, eats about 25 million Christmas puddings each year. So let us know if you are contributing to that fact. So I'm now going to, having given you all the irrelevant stuff, I'm going to pass over to Gil, who's going to have a chat with you about trifle and sherry. Over to you, Gil.
Thank you, Emma. Yes, I also don't come close to Santa's calorific diet on Christmas Eve, but I don't know, I might be pushing it a little bit more than I care to think with some of the indulgences. But I'm seeing members mentioning, all the different locations you're joining us from. Murky Cumbria, I think I saw there. So hopefully, if the weather is a little bit cool or wet, windy with you, a little bit of sweet puddings and sweet wines will change our kind of outlook on it all. Perhaps we can forget all about that and enjoy these 4 wines and 4 dishes in front, or whatever it is you might happen to have in front of you. But Emma, as you mentioned there, I'll kick things off food-wise with the sherry trifle. Members, if you've got this in front of you, I know, Emma, you and I have got the same one in front of us. Mm-hmm. But if we think about what we believe a trifle rather to look like, it's this layered dessert. Typically, we've got this sponge fingers soaked in, as an English dessert, as it was created in England, so soaked in either sherry, in the case of the one I have in front of me. Port is often also used as well. But then we have a layer of fruit, and that could be either fresh or in jelly form, followed by custard, followed by whipped cream. Hopefully that's what you've got, Emma, in front of you, something like that. But that's our typical look to a trifle these days, and it's an incredibly popular dessert throughout the year, but especially I think at Christmas, and certainly in my house, a classic strawberry trifle is what we like to have in our house. Raspberry, we may go there from time to time, but strawberry if we can. But there are lots of variations, as we know, out there. But as we might suspect, the origins of trifle don't have the dish looking exactly as we know it now. So it did start life. Well, oh, yes, indeed. Sorry, yeah, sprinkles on top can also be something that we see. Glacier cherries maybe as well, depending on what we've got. But we believe the name's likely derives from a French word of trifle, meaning kind of whimsical or frivolous. So perhaps showing kind of what this dish originally was created to be, perhaps with some leftover cakes or sponge puddings, things like that. But it didn't start life with the whipped cream. It certainly didn't start life as it now looks. It's evolved greatly. But the very first time we see a trifle named in any recipe books was in 1565, sorry, 1585, I think it was. And at that point, it was a kind of cooked cream, a little bit like a custard consistency, and then flavored with sugar and rose water and ginger. And we feel very much that trifle kind of evolved out of the fools, those sort of syllabubs and fools. So if we think of a classic gooseberry, that pureed stewed fruit with a kind of custard, or more typically these days, more of a cream base. But that's its origins. But the very first time we see it mentioned, as I said, was back in 1585. I wasn't there at that point, but I don't know what kind of stir it gave at that moment. But if we fast forward another 200 years, in 1747, Hannah Glass published her dish called, or her recipe rather, called Floating Island. And that's where we start to see it look a little bit more like the trifles that we have these days. So it was layers of wine flavored cream, slices of cake, and then a currant jelly on top. So it's there where we start to see it really take the form that we now know and love. I'd like to include, though, just because this one, when I looked this up, I couldn't quite get my head around what this meant. So maybe members or Emma, you know what this meant, perhaps. Maybe you've got this encyclopedia at home. But there was an encyclopedia released in 1891 by Theodore Francis Garrett that had various recipes of trifle, including 2 savoury recipes. One included veal and the other with lobster.
Ooh, okay.
Now, I'm hopeful that it didn't also have the fruit, custard, and cream, but I'm not. It's apparently an 8-volume encyclopedia, so I've not got it to find out. But I thought I'd put that into the event because that intrigued me, if nothing else. A couple more facts on trifle before we talk about the wine. More recent facts here. In 2022, for Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee, a trifle successfully won, or was selected rather, to be the pudding for the Platinum Jubilee. It was created by Gemma Melvin. It used lemon curd Swiss roll as its base. So again, a sort of a variation of the classic. But nice to see that at such an important event, the trifle was decided upon. And chef Adam Handling, who some of you may well be familiar with, great chef, also created a coronation trifle in 2023 for the coronation of King Charles III as well. So it is a dish that is synonymous with England, synonymous with Britain. And I do consume it quite a bit over the course of a year. But that's enough for the trifle. But what about the wine? Members, if you've got the wine in a glass, here's mine. I picked up the first glass I could find, which actually possibly isn't the right glass for it, but it works. But here we've got the Society's Exhibition Mature Medium Sweet Oloroso Sherry. So for our sherry trifle, and my sherry trifle here is flavored with, it's Amontillado sherry that's been used rather than Oloroso. But we thought, Emma, as we were discussing the various pairings, we thought this would be hopefully an ideal pairing here. So let me just very quickly, if I can, show on the slide. Emma, let me know if you can see the wine up there. Does that show for you?
Yeah, that's coming up. That's perfect.
Amazing. So this is, members, this is the wine that we're looking at, we're discussing. Let us know if you have this. Let me know if you've had it before, perhaps not in the glass right now. But Oloroso, as a name, sort of roughly translates as fragrant. And if you do have this in the glass, it's incredibly fragrant as a wine. Lots of as the note here states, figgy flavors, dried fruits. There's coffee and chocolate and walnuts, and a great richness and huge amounts of character on the wine. It's a wine that I love to consume on its own. A nice glass of that of an evening is rather special. But hopefully, members, for yourselves and indeed for us, Emma, it goes quite nicely with our trifle. But this is produced by a company called Sanchez Romat. They were founded in 1781. I'm just going to bring another slide up here of the map of the sherry region. There we are. So it was founded in 1781, as I said, by Don Juan Sanchez de la Torre. They're based right in the heart of Jerez. So if you can see me circling here, they're kind of based in Jerez de la Frontera. So right in the heartland of sherry country, or Jerez, in the southwest of Spain. A beautiful Mediterranean climate. I think the typical kind of average annual temperature here is about 17.5 degrees centigrade. So it does have a wonderful kind of consistency. It gets very hot in the summer. Emma, have you been there actually? Is this
yes, I have, and it is extremely hot in the summer. We honestly thought we were going to melt. Oh, but well, amazing at the same time.
Yeah. And so, as I say, 1781, they were founded. A couple of facts I always like to mention here, and I'm sure they're very proud of this as well. I certainly would be. But in the early 1900s, so 1909, Sanchez Ramate were appointed the official supplier of sherry to the House of Lords, followed some 8 years later with the exact same title for the Vatican as well. So a prestigious history that this estate has. In 1954, so what are we, 70 years ago, it was bought by a group of 5 friends who acquired the estate, and it's remained in those 5 families ever since. So it is one of the largest and one of those estates that is still owned by families rather than a cooperative ownership. But they have 2 vineyard sites, or 2 estates rather. One is situated a bit further towards the coastline, and here is where they get their fino sherries, or their drier, lighter styles of sherries, your finos and your manzanilla perhaps as well. But what we're focusing on for this comes from their second estate, which is further inland in the interior, the warmer heartland of Jerez, and that's where their grapes are growing that ultimately become their Oloroso. If I stop sharing there. As I mentioned, this is the Oloroso. You can see the color members of the wine there. It's a very deep, dark, very unctuous almost looking. But Emma, what do you like about this wine? I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you that question.
I love the fact that it is just so figgy and dried fruit. And it does feel, this is not very technical, but it does feel like you're being given a bit of a wine hug. It's just really comforting. And yes, the Williams and Humber, as you like, Amontillado would also be perfect as well.
Yes.
But no, it's just there's just, maybe because I kind of always think of sherry from childhood, which probably says a lot about my upbringing actually. But it just makes me feel very comforted. It's just a really gorgeous smell, and the more you smell it, the more you can smell different things that are going on as well. So it's just incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And it's a really good price as well.
Absolutely. I'm just catching up there as well, members, with some of the comments that you've put in the chat. I think absolutely this Oloroso PX as well would work with chocolate Yule Log. We were saying, Emma, when we were putting together the tasting, that actually a number of the wines that we've paired specifically for tonight with the different dishes would actually work with a number of the dishes across the 4 and more besides.
Okay, so it's my turn to put you on the spot. Do you think that this would work with panettone? Because I've used panettone to make a bread and butter pudding, but I've never really had panettone as, a dessert on its own. So I'm not quite sure. What do you think?
It's an interesting one. Actually, I'm not sure if I have either. But it's certainly something that I would experiment with.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, in theory, there shouldn't be anything that would not work, should there?
No.
The only thing I'm wondering is whether, if it's a lighter style of panettone, whether it might be a little bit you're saying dry Oloroso with panettone. Yeah, maybe. I think with any food and wine matching, the thing that you are really looking for is you're trying to make sure, panettone French toast, that sounds gorgeous. And you could have it with the Oloroso in the morning as well. Get your day off to a perfect start. So the main thing that you're looking at with food and wine matching is that you just get your balances right. So, make sure that the wine or the food isn't so massively more flavoursome and kind of richer than the other, because otherwise one will dominate.
Yeah. And this wine, yeah, I think this is a very, I mean, sherry generally, whether it be your finos or your manzaniers on the drier end of the scale, the lighter styles, right the way through to your Pedro Jimenez and everything in between. They're such versatile wines, and this is a medium sweet. There's a certain richness and a sweetness to it, but the acidity is very bright still as well. It's very clean on the finish, and so this would certainly go with a number of different foods, both sweet, but also this could work quite nicely with a few savory dishes as well, I think.
Oh, definitely with it's pork and mushrooms, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're a meat eater. And I think there are some cheeses as well that it does go particularly well with. Yeah, panettone French toast for Christmas breakfast. I think that's the answer.
You've got a few liking that idea there.
We just started a new tradition. I'm not going to do the eggnog and champagne and smoked salmon. We're just going to go all in.
Yeah, French toast with Oloroso. I love it.
Perfect. So have you tried it with your trifle?
I'm just going to do that now.
Please excuse us as we eat on screen. It's one of the problems of doing food and wine matching.
Perhaps if you do that first, otherwise we've got lots of moments where neither of us are speaking there. So you taste them there. But yeah, just I suppose maybe very quickly mention what we mean by Oloroso, or how the wine's created, possibly really quickly. If it's something that can be done quickly, it's quite a complex.
I was going to say good luck with that one.
Complex thing, but yeah. So for Olorosos, this sort of sherries, we talk about oxidative aging. So for sherry, the producer has that decision whether they go biological aging or oxidative. And as you might expect for oxidative aging, the wine is aged in the presence of oxygen. So they're stored in barrels in kind of high humidity bodegas, and the wines are stored there for several years. We have the Solera process, so fractional blending, gradually topping up with new make wines. So ultimately, you don't have a single vintage wine in your glass. You have a very complex over multiple vintages, building up, as I say, those layers of complexity and richness and character, but all aged oxidatively. And in order to do this, as it is a fortified wine as well, the producer will fortify their wine up to 17% alcohol. That then prevents flora, or this kind of yeast layer over the top of that forms a protective layer above the wine, so not allowing oxygen to impact. But by going up to 17%, it allows the flora to not develop, therefore having oxygen right from the get-go impacting on the wine. So you get this relatively indestructible, I suppose, because it's had all that oxidative character and all that tertiary notes, as we'd say. So again, those dried fruits and the nuts and the coffee, but that's sort of in an incredibly quick way of saying it. That's kind of how it's produced.
So ideal temperature to drink Amontillado and Oloroso. I always personally, and Gil, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, I always say the sweeter down you're going, the less chilled I make it. So an Amontillado, I would probably put in the fridge door for about an hour. If it's a dry Amontillado, maybe a couple of hours. Whereas an Oloroso, I would be just ever so slight chill. So, what they used to describe as cellar temperature.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because
I agree. I mean,
on that recently, haven't you?
I do agree with that, and I think there are a number of ultimately, I suppose it comes down to how you like to have the wine. Rather than us sort of stating this is exactly the temperature that you must have it. But for me personally, I completely agree. But I always chill my sherry, regardless of its sweetness level, regardless of the production method. But yes, for for me, this has had a little bit of time, maybe 15 minutes on ice, just to bring the temperature down a little bit. And it's at a good temperature.
Yeah, and with wines that don't naturally have high acidity, by chilling it down a little bit, you kind of increase its perception of freshness as well. So sometimes a wine that might taste a little bit fat on its, if it was at room temperature, just ever so slightly chilled, it just tastes a little bit fresher, which can be really useful. Andy's asking, how long will it keep when open? For me, for the Oloroso, because of the fact that it's been aged oxidatively, I don't keep it for over a year, but I will open it and I'll drink it over, normally drink a bottle of Oloroso. Giving away a lot of my personal secrets tonight, aren't I? A lot of Oloroso drink over the Christmas period, so over a kind of month or
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
Drink that. What about you?
absolutely, absolutely. And this, as you say, because it's oxidatively aged, there is a degree of indestructibility to it.
Yeah.
That isn't, forevermore. We open the bottle here, it won't be exactly like this in a year's time, but we are looking more towards that. Yeah, 4 weeks comfortably, in my view, as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 days or a week for other wines, or certainly for your drier styles, your more delicate phenols when we're talking sherry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
delicate, you open, you drink.
yeah,
Whereas these ones, because they have had that, it's like Madeira, they've had that
yeah,
the oxidative, as they say, the abuse, but the oxidation, then they're absolutely fine. And that's another one of the really lovely things about them is you can just have a little glass with a mince pie,
mm-hmm.
glass of your Christmas pudding, glass of your chocolate, glass of your
Yeah,
trifle.
yeah.
It's not going to keep that long, is it, at that rate? So what did you think? How did that work for you? I know, and you managed to get a little bit.
I had a little, yeah, I had a quick cheeky taste there. Worked brilliantly. Love that. The characters. So mine actually, rather than strawberry in this occasion, I've got more of a pear and pineapple.
Oh my goodness.
A part of mine, not homemade, I will declare. I ran out of time, but it brings out a lovely kind of candied pineapple, almost sort of feel in there, and an extra dimension alongside the richness and the so much earthy, but that lovely warming character that the Oloroso provides. You then get this great hint of sort of fresh fruit and a little bit of candied pineapple. So yeah, quite complex. I enjoyed
Mine
that.
was a strawberry trifle this time because
Oh.
again, it's the last event of this year that we've got, and so both of us have completely run out of time to make our own. Originally, I was going to make everything, bring it in, and give half to Gil, but that didn't materialize. So I've got a strawberry trifle, but it's actually really nice,
Yeah.
and it does work really well with the sherry. So happy days. Um,
Excellent.
and yeah, the chocolate, yeah, it does feel quite chocolatey as well as quite figgy and quite spicy. It's just quite warming.
Mm.
Are we happy to move on to the Sauterne along
Yeah,
with the cheese? Um,
absolutely. Is this
Now
a
before,
controversial dish to put in?
as I say, before any members say anything like cheese is not a pudding, we do really appreciate that. But we did say actually, cheese does come up a lot in a Christmas banquet, or kind of a Christmas kind of food map, one might say. And so we felt that it would have been wrong to just completely bypass the cheese, although it did mean that we had to leave out panettone bread and butter pudding, which made us sad at the time. So there are many different cheeses you can go for. There are, yeah, we decided to go for two of the classics. And so we went for a blue cheese and a cheddar. So hopefully people have got either or in front of them, or something that's making them happy at the moment. And we thought we're going to go a little bit nuts and put it with the Sauternes this evening. So a little bit of a kind of the theory behind our thinking. So as we always say, cheese and wine matching can be really tricky because cheese is really full flavored, it's really salty, and it can be quite high in fat, so it can really coat the mouth, which means that you have to, as a wine, you have to be quite full on to break through all of that. And so many people just go, oh, well, cheese and wine matching, it doesn't work. And a lot of people do cheese and beer matching and cheese and cider matching, which works brilliantly as well. So do experiment around your cheese and drink choices. But a few pointers to kind of help you get started. White wines tend to work better with cheeses than red wines do because white wines have more fruit and more acidity, which cuts through that kind of richness and the mouth coating qualities of the cheese. And then sweeter wines and fortified wines work really well with cheese because you've got that sweet sugar kind of sweet salt kind of combo, and then also you got, hopefully, ideally, what you're looking to do is match weight for weight. So don't overpower a really delicate cheese with something like a port. There's a kind of general misconception that port goes with the cheese board, and cheese and whiskey as well, absolutely. So port goes with the cheese board, but actually port quite often will completely overpower your more delicate cheeses. So for that in mind, things like sherries and Madeiras, so your Oloroso, and also kind of sweet wines like Sauternes can make really good pairings. You've got the dried, if you kind of think of the dried fruit and nuts that work with the cheese, and then you think of the dried fruit and nuts that you put on a cheese board as well. So you've got dried fruit and nuts and things like Oloroso in Madeira, in Tawny Ports. We've gone Sauternes because I just love the combination. I keep reading down the side and going, yeah, there's a few comments that have been made. I'll come back to those in a moment, because otherwise I distract myself by, oh, shiny. So we've gone for the Society's Exhibition Sauternes, which apparently I think is out of stock at the moment.
They've just gone out of stock, actually, yes.
Think the halves out of stock. Hopefully they're not both out of stock. They will be coming back in again, but at this point we should probably say any Sauternes will work, or any kind of patriotised sweet white wine, I think, would work as well, without meaning to be too out there. This particular one is the Society's Exhibition, which is made by Chateau Cantegril, which they're based in Mauzac. They've been the home of the Society's Exhibition Sauternes since 2001. Just a quick aside, all Mauzac can be classed as Sauternes. So you can see Mauzac, it's the little bit within the Sauternes kind of area. So if you are Mauzac, you can actually just put Sauternes on the label, but you can, if you are Mauzac, if you're Sauternes, you cannot have Mauzac on the label. So it works one way, but it doesn't work the other way. So Mauzac has kind of very silty, quite alluvial soil, which gives much more freshness, much more light, kind of a little bit more lightness, a little bit more elegance perhaps, than the other communes, which is Sauternes, Prégnac, Beaume, and Farges, all of which are known for producing much kind of much creamier, more creamy, more rounded, more full-bodied wines. So this is a blend of 93% Semillon, 7% Sauvignon Blanc, aged in 25% new oak, and it keeps beautifully. You can drink it now, but you could also, you could keep it for up to 10 years in a half bottle. We keep, every now and then I find something in the cellar, in the garage, and go, oh, I didn't realize you had this. And they do age beautifully. They just become more and more, the way I'd probably describe it is more and more medicinal the longer you keep them. So it depends whether you like that style or not. So it's Sauternes. Somebody was saying that they've never had Sauternes with cheese before. Sauternes a classic pairing for blue cheese, and kind of part of the theory behind it is you've got the mold in terms of the noble rot in the wine, and the mold in terms of the blue in the blue cheese, that really work together. But then you've also got the sweetness and the saltiness of the white, sweetness of the wine, the real salty creaminess of the blue, that just play off each other really well. And then kind of in a similar vein, it does work really well with the kind of salty, very tangy flavor that you get from a good English cheddar. And I'm not referring to the big blocks of cheddar that I buy for cooking, but the kind of proper artisanal British cheddars instead. So yeah, how do you find the pairing?
You know, I was listening to you there rather than trying.
Outrageous.
So sorry.
Mauzac would be
Wow,
absolutely amazing. Do you think, Gil, that a sparkling would work with cheese? I know I've heard of sparkling, so dry champagne with blue. is a really interesting combo.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would be interested to try this, seeing as we've got it in front of us. I might try the cheese with the Mauzac.
Yeah.
Well, the sweet sparkly.
And again, because it's got that sweetness to the wine,
Mm.
I haven't done that, but I'll certainly do the same sort of experiment. I would like to think the combination with the blue cheese is going to go incredibly well. In a similar way to the Sauternes sweetness. Just kind of blanketing that salty, tangy character. But I always find just with Sauternes, and I think it's part of that, the botrytis, the noble rot character, always that marmalade-y sort of feel, which isn't just for Sauternes, because I think that is very much from the process and from botrytis. So you would have the same in your Tokai or your sweet wines from Germany and Alsace and others. But I like that when I can find that, and it's nice and prominent in the wine, which it very much is for me in this Sauternes. I really enjoy that flavor. But let me give it a little try.
Again, I think the most important thing is that one doesn't overpower the other. So I know Gil's got a you've got a Stilton, haven't you?
Yes.
And so because I cheated and I got a Gorgonzola. So we've gone for quite different blue cheeses, which I think would be really interesting, especially when it comes to the sparkling. So demi-sec champagne. For me, cheese board versus sweet treat dessert wine. If it's a nice bottle of demi-sec champagne, my go-to would be something like an apple tart. Especially the it's apple tart tatin, isn't it? I always call it the apple upside down tart. So something like that that's got slightly caramelized and just really, it's sweet, but it's not massively sweet. Because funnily enough, when we were trying, it's a very difficult job that we have. When we were trying the Yule Log, we did try it with the Society's demi-sec champagne, and then we tried it with the Mauzac. But the demi-sec champagne is a beautiful champagne, but it wasn't sweet enough for the chocolate. It just couldn't hold its own. What do you think, Carl?
No, I completely agree.
I keep dropping you in it, don't I? You're like, hang
it
on.
was an interesting combination pairing there with the demi-sec, as you mentioned. It did need that little bit more sweetness, but I think the Emma and Gil Mauzac has that. It's got a little bit more residual sugar. So yes, I think that could.
Definitely.
Off to buy an apple tart. Well, that and French toast and Oloroso sherry's first thing in the morning. You're throwing lots of ideas around. I like it.
And Andy's thing, likes the Sauternes with the blue, but not with the cheddar. That's really interesting. Yeah. And the smaller Plantagenet, that's a really lovely wine as well. But I get you for a cheesy lunch. I think sometimes by the time you've got to the end of the meal, it's very difficult to go backwards again to a white wine, rather than kind of keep with the, unless you've done white anyway, or kind of keep with the red theme.
Yeah.
But well, I'm glad it worked with the blue. I really liked Sauternes and blue as a combination.
And of course, then there's that question of when does the cheese course come in? Is it before the dessert or is it after the dessert?
But at the Wine Society, we've always done it French style, so it's always come before the pudding. But I think that's more so that we can fit another red wine in. But yeah, I think when you're at home, you do it how you like.
Very good. Lovely pairing there, yes.
Excellent. I'm going to go back to it a bit later. I might go back to it while you're doing your next wine, actually, and just see how that's working with the sparkling. So yeah, might come back to you on that one.
Well, the next wine, Emma, as you've mentioned,
sorry.
The next wine is our Samos. I'm just reaching over. Sorry if this makes a noise. There we go. Is the Samos Anthemis from the Isle of Samos, the Greek island. It's a lovely Vin Natural white Muscat, which I'll come on to the kind of creation of and the style of wine that it is, and a little bit of about the producer. But we're pairing this with our Christmas pudding. It wouldn't be a Christmas puddings event without the Christmas pudding, also known as the plum pudding, I think, as well. Not quite sure if the name is as prevalent as it used to be, but certainly if you see the term plum pudding, that is another descriptor of Christmas pudding. Interestingly, though, I don't know of it to ever consist of plums, not in its sort of fresh form, despite the name. It may be dried plums, but typically it's other fruits rather than. So I'm not quite sure where that came from as plum pudding, but it does get a little bit of reference. Sir Walter Scott, I think in 1808, included name-checked plum pudding in one of his famous poems at the beginning of the 1800s, 1808. And Charles Dickens refers to it as well as Mrs. Cratchit, bringing it onto the table in the Christmas Carol. So it is a dish a bit like the trifle that is sort of synonymous with England, with Britain. And there's a popular myth, and I'm going to just make sure I'm looking at my note on this one just to make sure I get it right, because it's quite an extensive myth, quite a complex myth about its sort of association with Christmas, as it potentially dates to a custom in medieval England. The pudding should be made on the 25th Sunday after Trinity, and to be prepared with 13 ingredients, which were said to represent both Christ and the 12 apostles. And every member of the household stirs it in turn from east to west in order to honor the three wise men, or the Magi, and their journey in that same direction. And then there's holly on top. Again, holly was referenced by Charles Dickens in the novel. So I just lost you on the screen there. But that's supposed to represent the crown of thorns. And then finally, that flaming brandy represents the passion of Christ. So that's a very popular myth, whether we choose to believe it or not, that's down to us individually there, but I quite like that's the story behind that. But despite that and that sort of medieval potential connections, it isn't until really the 17th century that we start to see plum pudding or Christmas pudding referenced. And while we believe it originated in the 14th century, now it very much, again, like trifle, not in the form that we now know and love, but much more in a kind of porridge consistency. This was a frumenty, is that right? I think that was as it was described or originally known, and it was typically beef or mutton with raisins, currants, prunes, wines, and then spices, typically cinnamon, saffron, those sorts of flavors. But also, it was always sort of designed to go alongside the main meal or as a starter rather than as a dessert. So it's evolved quite a bit over the years, as we now see it as a dessert. I had another fact, but you stole it from me, Emma, right at the very beginning when you mentioned in 1714 King George I. Allegedly, he tasted a plum pudding and was so taken by it that he requested it as part of his Christmas feast in 1714, and apparently he had the nickname of King Pudding. I don't know if he knew of that, or how much he enjoyed that as a nickname, or how prevalent that name was, but something I read, a little bit of research.
And I love that. That's something new you got on me. I did not have that
one. But it was really in the Victorian period that the Christmas pudding, as we now see it and we now recognize it, really started to take its form, and we start to see these familiar recipes from the 1830s onwards. I mentioned about, well, actually, I haven't, that sort of stir up Sunday. So I mentioned about the members of the family stirring the pudding in turn. And that's a tradition of making the pudding the last Sunday before Advent. So sort of, what's that, late November, if memory serves me right, the fifth Sunday before Christmas. But yes, in turn, and that east to west, potentially. Members, if you follow this tradition, it'd be lovely to hear if anybody online follows this tradition, or you have your own family traditions that you've maybe been brought up in and that you continue yourselves as well. But It's an absolute classic dish. I've got mine in front of me now. I'm smelling it. It's not flaming, so it's safe. But it's here in front of me, and we're pairing it, yes, with this Samos Anthemis. I'm not sure if that can come through on
Yeah, that
screen
has,
here.
yeah.
Always wonder if it comes back to front, but I'm just going to pour a little bit.
Gil, what temperature do you serve your Samos at?
I serve mine chilled.
Mm.
I would, for me, a little bit, I suppose, like the Amontillado, so certainly an hour or so, just to
Yeah.
bring it down a good few degrees. So it's not at cellar temperature; it's a little bit cooler than that.
Mm.
Perhaps almost, what am I, about 9 or 10 degrees, perhaps that sort
Yeah,
of
because
temperature.
I've served mine straight from the side in the
Mm,
kitchen, and it needs to go down a few degrees.
yeah,
So Carol's asking, and I mean, nothing's a precise art, is it? Especially
no,
where we're involved. But couple of hours in the fridge door.
I think so. Yes, mine, as I say, is about an hour or so on ice, which obviously chills it a bit quicker.
Hmm.
But yes, a couple of hours should bring it down to a nice temperature. But
Yeah.
again, that's my preference for it for sure.
And as you said before, it is all about your personal preference. So, I mean, as we've done tastings for years, we know that some people like their wines more chilled, some people like them more room temperature. So it is, we're giving kind of suggestions, but then it's for you guys to
Yes.
tweak as to what
Yeah.
works best for you.
And it is interesting tasting it at we talk about food and the interaction that food has with wine, but actually temperature of the wine as well can have quite a bit of an impact.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah,
certainly science behind all of these sort of myths and rules
absolutely.
within wine, but yeah, ultimately, as you say, it comes down to we're the individuals drinking the wine, so drink it how you like it, with the
Yeah.
food that you like and at the temperature that you like.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You always say you've gone to the effort to get it, so you make sure you're happy.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now I'm going to see if I can share the next screen. Bear with me a moment. Here we go. And just to show the wine that we've got in the glass here, so the Samos, because this is a wonderfully unique wine. It's produced in a way that's very familiar, perhaps, for those of us who drink fortified sweet wines. Excuse me, from Roussillon and areas of sort of southwest France in Bagnols and Rifsol, Maury, where we have this vin du naturel, as we can see here on screen. This kind of sweet fortified wine. So this is a white muscat or muscat blanc à petit grain. Is the particular varietal and the particular muscat here. There are many variations of, but this one's quite a hardy. It can withstand warmer, drier climates. And on the Isle of Samos, where we're about a mile in the Aegean Sea, about a mile away from from Turkish coast, it is very warm. It's got a wonderful Mediterranean climate there, so it's a great variety that's really found favor and found form here. In fact, I believe something like 98% of all plantings in the island or on the Isle of Samos is to this particular variety, Muscat Blanc Petit Grain. So it's an incredibly important grape. And any wine that's labeled Samos has to be 100% from this variety. So I think the next we see this map of the island, we can see exactly how close that is to Turkey there. It's a very mountainous island. Anybody who's been there, I haven't. I'm talking as if I've been there, but I know it to be a very mountainous region. And the majority of the vineyards are found on the north-facing side of the central mountains, which we can sort of see here. I think so in this sort of region, but on those northern as I say, on the northern slopes at high altitudes, which is key because it is very warm. It is quite a very Mediterranean climate, but being planted at higher altitudes, some of the vineyards are up to 900 meters above sea level. We get this wonderful diurnal range, this fluctuation between warm days and cool evenings, which just helps to prolong and extend the growing season. Maintains or retains rather in the grapes that lovely fresh aromatic character and the acidity. So we find wines or the grapes rather very healthy grapes that have perfect ripeness, but definitely keep that acidity and that aromatic character that we that we're after really for sweet wines, because we want that balance from the sweetness and we want the acidity, as we've spoken about already. But this particular wine, it comes from a cooperative. They're a cooperative of about 2,100 growers. Again, pretty much the vast majority, if not the entire production of the Isle of Samos, goes through this one cooperative, the United Winemaking Agricultural Cooperative, or UWC, founded in 1934. And really their primary focus was twofold. One, to protect the livelihoods of the growers, and to do that as well as the protection of the viticulture on this island, because it's an incredibly historically rich, viticulturally speaking. I'm throwing popular myths out there tonight, but a myth is that the god Dionysus himself taught the people of Samos viticulture and winemaking as a thank you for their help in defeating one of his enemies. And so there is definitely evidence of viticulture going back to the 5th century BC. So a huge history of viticulture within the region. But it's kind of, I don't know, a springboard moment perhaps. That time in the sun where it really was put on the European map, if not the world map, was during the phylloxera louse that was just riding through most of mainland Europe and devastating vineyards. It was, the Isle of Samos was largely unaffected by it. So a lot of Europeans looking to purchase wines, but couldn't get wines from Italy, couldn't get wines from France. Because of phylloxera, had to look elsewhere. And one of the places that they very much looked was the sweet muscat wines of Greece, and in particular the Isle of Samos. So that was its sort of, I wouldn't say it's its heyday, because that would imply it's not now, but that was really its kind of its heightened point. But the quality, I think, is exceptional. It's a very uniquely made wine. So it's a wine that's been fortified, as I say. They fortify this wine with neutral grape spirit, so typically around 95 to 98% alcohol. It doesn't impart any flavor, but what it does do is it halts the fermentation. So they add this spirit during fermentation, which halts it before all the sugars are being consumed. Hence why we get this fortified, what is the 15% alcohol, and the sweet from that residual sugar that's left behind. It's then aged, because we can see the color on the wine there. It's got this wonderful dark brown color. Again, oxidized. It's aged for 5 years in oak barrels before then being bottled and released. So in a similar way, I suppose, to the Oloroso in that oxidative character, but a very different wine. It's not a sherry in its character. But hopefully, for those of you who've got the Christmas pudding beside you, it goes rather well. What do you think?
Andy was saying, will it keep till Christmas Day now it's open? I said it certainly will. But for me, it's so utterly drinkable. I don't think my bottle's going to last. I think I think it's going to be one of those ones where you'll invent a reason every evening to just have a little tiny glass of it. Just before, just while you're watching TV, just before you go to bed, just a tiny glass. It does. I really love it with the Christmas pudding.
Yeah.
And while you were talking, I checked for research purposes, checked through the other wines, and actually the first 3 went absolutely fine, but the Samos was definitely my favorite. The Oloroso worked because you got that dried fruit kind of flavors, but possibly personally slightly overpowering.
Yeah.
And I thought at the end of a rather large lunch, which, like most times Christmas Day is an Oloroso right at that point with quite a dense pudding. I was like, gosh, that's quite heavy. The Sauternes always works much better than I think it's going to. Yeah. But the Samos is definitely my favorite. Yeah. But if you need a wine that's just going to work through for cheese and then Christmas pudding, I would be looking at the Sauternes or the Samos. What do you think?
I'm very happy for you to have the Sauternes. I'll take the Samos. It's again, Mems, when we were looking at the various options, I was really keen to show a wine like this, because it is a wine that we don't know a huge amount about. Generally, it isn't an area that we naturally gravitate to. But the quality you know, once in the glass, the quality really speaks. You know, this is a well-crafted, very well-made wine that is quite unique, that is very different. But in these sorts of circumstances, it's a perfect pairing, and I'm very happy that it's worked.
I am too, and it's that's the lovely thing about doing these kind of events, that we can pull out these wines that people might not necessarily think about. The sherry, the sherry less so, but the Sauternes, the Samos, and go, well, hey, give that a go, and see what you think. It is a lovely wine.
Yeah,
really lovely.
You realise there, as you're saying, the sherry, the Sauternes, the Samos, our final was a sparkling as well. We've kind of inadvertently gone for
The sparkling did
all
not
S.
work with the Christmas pudding. It was horrible.
Okay.
For me, for me. Anybody who's got the sparkling and the Christmas pudding and it works really well, please do tell us, because I'd be really interested to hear that. But for me, the sparkling was sweet. The Christmas pudding just, it was the wrong flavor profile.
Yeah.
All those dark, caramelized, kind of dense Christmas pudding flavors with a very light, sweet, sparkling wine. It just, I wondered, because bubbles do quite often, they cut through so much, which is why sparkling wine quite often works so well with chocolate. But on this occasion, no, the Christmas pudding won.
Yeah.
It was a battle royale, and the Christmas pudding definitely won.
Yeah. I think those dried fruits, perhaps from the other three, albeit the Sauternes has a different profile of dried fruit. Might be the way to go. Might be that's the reason.
That's a good point. And even with the Sauternes, whilst it's noble rot rather than necessarily dried, there is an element of raisioning that's there as well. I mean, yeah, I think my thing I liked about the Sauternes and the Samos was that they still had that freshness. I find Christmas pudding, we were talking earlier, and I confessed, Christmas pudding isn't my favorite thing in the world. I quite often make it into ice cream, and I find that lighter for Christmas dessert, and I can feel kind of now I'm going to get shot down. But with those two, at least it freshened it up a little bit, whereas the sherry was also, it worked because they were on a level, but it just felt too heavy for me.
Brilliant.
There we go. So is it my turn? Shall I talk about the
yes,
Mauzac
indeed.
then? Which I think we were both really taken with. So, couldn't face a whole Yule Log. I agree, which is why I bought a chocolate cupcake. That drinking the Samos, the chocolate and orange ganache. Yes, please.
Oh, yes.
That sounds absolutely stunning. Yeah, that's your evening sorted. So for those of you who got it, the M le Mauzac, l'Ancestral, Blanquette de Limoux. It's Antech, and we've put this one with the chocolate Yule Log stroke, for me, chocolate cupcake from Marks and Spencer's. I couldn't really find out a lot about a Yule Log that was of massive interest, I'm afraid. The most important the thing I found on every website was that the Yule Log was the chunk of tree that got cut down that lasted you on the fire over the Christmas period. And it is a chocolate roulade dessert with kind of cream inside. So quite chocolatey, kind of in the shape of a log, and very typically French, I think, as well.
Yes, I found, not necessarily, or even potentially conflicting origin stories, but I definitely, there's that French, potentially a French dessert, but also those kind of Celtic traditions. But it could very well be both, as we know.
Go on. Well, yeah, they do have links. So tell me more.
Oh, that was it.
Oh, is that it?
No.
Okay.
But no, as you say, kind of stemmed from the actual Yule log that was lit and then continuously kept alight throughout that period. Yes, and lots of sort of superstitions surrounding it. Yeah, yeah. But for me, the Yule Log is a chocolate.
It's a chocolate pudding.
Decadence indulgence.
So we put it with the Emily Mauzac, which is made by Maison Antech. They are a family-owned winery based in Limoux, which is an appellation in Languedoc-Roussillon in the south of France. Antech are particularly known for their sparkling wines. It was a domain created in the early 20th century by Eugénie Limoux, who was one of the first women in the Languedoc to manage a vineyard. In 1931, her niece Marguerite married Edmond Antech, he did a lot to make the estate more widely known and kind of to make it more commercial as well. Edmund's sons, George and Roger, succeeded him. They maintained the winemaking philosophy, so they kind of kept things going, but they also introduced new technology as well. So George was very much in charge of the sales and the marketing side of things, and Roger took on the kind of the technical aspects of running the vineyard. Since 1995, George's daughter Françoise has been running the winery, and she's joined in 2020 by her son Baptiste. He's now the 7th generation of the Antech family to be involved in the business. And if any of the members who are watching come to our sparkling wine tastings or even the Languedoc-Roussillon tastings, you'll have probably met Françoise. She is absolutely delightful. She's as lovely as her wines are. So definitely worth a visit as well if you're ever in the Languedoc. So Blanquette de Limoux is the first sparkling wine to be produced in France. It was produced long before Champagne. Little known fact, Champagne tends to take over a little bit. And in 1938, Blanquette de Limoux became the first AOC established in the Languedoc region. So Blanquette de Limoux, it can be a blend of 3 grape varieties. You've got Mauzac, which must be dominant, has a minimum of 90%, and the balance is made up by Chardonnay and Chenin. Mauzac is prolific in Limoux, but pretty much non-existent anywhere else. So it produces a wine that has got lots of kind of fresh cut grass, so it's kind of very green, slightly sappy, slightly apple peel, and it can be a little bit reminiscent of apple cider as well, so kind of very fresh, very appley, very fruity. This is the method ancestral, which means that rather than the kind of typical traditional method, which is how you make champagne, which goes through 2 fermentations, method ancestral goes through a single fermentation. The wines are bottled before the fermentation process is completed. So you get a wine with a slightly lower alcohol content. The bubble is relatively gentle and you've still got some sweetness. So fermentation starts, it's paused midway. The wine is bottled, or kind of wine stroke grape must is bottled, and then the fermentation continues in the bottle, at which point the carbon dioxide is trapped. When the desired amount of bubbliness is achieved, the wines are chilled again. They're riddled and disgorged just like you would a traditional method, but no additional, so no expedition liqueur is added. So no additional sugar is added. What you have is the natural grape sugars in the wine. It's referred to as method ancestral because it's assumed that this is one of the earliest forms of sparkling winemaking. So it's kind of, the way I always think of it is sparkling winemaking by accident, but a really beautiful accident. What do you think, Gil?
I love this wine, and as you've said, the estate and the family and the people behind it are also, fantastic. And
Yeah,
there's nothing, in my view, there is nothing to dislike in any way, shape, or form. And it's what is the percentage actually on this? Do you know?
actually, that's a good point. Let me find out. 6.5.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really, it's a lighter way if you compare it to things like the Samos, you know, it is a much lighter way to finish your meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you get, so on the palette there, apples is the big. There's a lot of lovely lemon freshness, but fresh and cooked apples, baked apples, really
Yeah.
coming through. Beautiful acidity with that sweetness. So yes, it's got a degree of those natural sugars, and the sweetness is certainly there, but it finishes really, really fresh, really clean. And I really enjoy this combination because it isn't a typical combination that you might necessarily, you know, sort of gravitate to, a kind of slightly sweeter, lower alcohol sparkling wine with a Yule Log, which again was why we were so keen to try and so keen to include it tonight.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it a lot.
I mean, we always used to, whenever I used to do the chocolate workshops, I used to joke that it should be just a chocolate and muscat workshop. So it's like, okay, we could do a sparkling muscat because the bubbles in the wine also really help to break. We talked about cheese having that mouth coating texture, and the oh, sorry, yes, of course, I've
Have you got
got mine on the floor. If you hang on, I've got it. Don't know whether that works. Hopefully you can see it. So the bubbles in the sparkling really cut through that mouth coating gooiness that you can get with chocolate, and it can really, even though it's not matched sweetness for sweetness, it still really breaks through the sweetness and the richness that you can have with chocolate.
It might well be my favorite pairing of the four, and you may have been asking me that question soon, but I've gone and jumped the gun and I've said it. I've said it already, and actually it's perhaps unfair of me to myself to say such a thing so early on, because I thought all four were terrific pairings, and I don't need, you know, well, if I need to pick one, it would be that. But then I do quite like my chocolate. I've got a bit of a sweet tooth for that.
Yeah, I have to say my muffin's very nice, but I think a Yule Log would be even better.
I would show the picture of my slice of Yule Log. I've not got the entire Yule Log in front of me, but I have also kind of decimated it with the fork, so it's not looking at its best right now. But no, that was tremendous. Yes. Do you have a favorite across? Well, you've tried all four wines with the dishes as well, actually.
I have, yeah. I've really gone all in. I do like that combo. I always find it astounding. And so the other sparkling wines we looked at for chocolate, just remember this today, was a Moscato d'Asti, a demi-sec champagne, and the M de Mauzac. So we looked at all three. We liked the M de Mauzac most because we felt it had the most sweetness and that kind of slight richness to it, whereas the sparkling champagne, gorgeous, but would be better with fruit-based desserts, definitely. And the Moscato, if anybody's got the one that we have at the moment, we found a little bit too fresh, but I think with a chocolate mousse, it would have worked really well. And kind of chocolate. The other thing Moscato works really well with is chocolate and orange. So yeah, the chocolate and orange ganache with the Samos also would have worked really well with the sparkling. But actually, I think my favorite, and I think it might be because it's one of my favorite puddings, is the trifle with the Oloroso. Yeah. And also, I'm the only person in my family who drinks Oloroso sherry, so it's just like job done.
Not the only one who eats trifle, though.
Sadly not. No. Although that's probably a good thing. Otherwise, I'd have to make really tiny portions.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. I wonder though, have you got any other? Well, I was going to say, actually, any other sort of traditional dessert pairings that you, as we're talking, sort of puddings and wines?
I know. When we were talking at work, Ewan was saying that there's a orange and port trifle that he was absolutely waxing lyrical about. I think it was
Mm.
the Felicity Cloak
I
one.
think so, actually, yes.
So that's his go-to every Christmas.
Mm.
I love bread and butter pudding,
Yeah,
made with panettone, and for me that goes so well with Sauternes. So that's kind of, but that's not really a Christmas Day pudding. That's a Christmas Eve pudding or a
hmm,
Boxing Day pudding, depending on who's coming round when.
yeah, okay,
Um, Excellent. Alistair's saying favourite pairing, Mauzac and Yule Log from Tesco's, and then
yep,
Samos and Christmas Pud. Perfect. Or
okay.
50 plus. Christmas Pud, I'd presume.
But I think actually, am I right that that recipe, or certainly there's an orange and port trifle recipe that we have, so we can maybe.
Yeah. We can, if anybody's interested, we can find it and send it out.
I
What was
might have
your
to make
favorite?
that
So
myself.
your favorite pairing was the Mauzac and the chocolate Yule
I'm
Log,
going to go
wasn't
for the
it?
Mauzac and the Yule Log, yes, with the trifle as a close second.
And then Peter was Sauternes and Christmas pudding.
Yep,
Very, very traditional. I like
yes,
it. I
love it.
like it.
Yep.
But I mean, sometimes, depending on how many of you there are as well, you've got to be slightly pragmatic. So you've got your wines with the kind of the starter and then the main course. And then ideally, you're looking for something that's going to take you through the cheese and the pudding as well. Because otherwise, you're going to end up with 6 or 7 bottles open at the kind of the same time, which
Yep.
for some of us we see that as a challenge, and others just see that as a not a good idea at
Yep.
all. So yeah, so kind of finding something that you think can run through the latter half of the menu would
Yep.
be quite a good idea.
Yeah, very good tip.
It
Like that. Well, this has been a pleasure. I'm just wondering, where
certainly
are we? Oh,
has.
almost time. Any other I don't know, revelations or recipe ideas or times of Christmas Day in which to open certain bottles of wine?
Oh, for me, I think it's always eggnog first.
Yep.
I used Jamie Oliver's recipe, it's great. And then champagne with smoked salmon, and then just a free for all after that. I think
And
by
then
the time
whatever.
I've had eggnog and champagne, I don't really care how
Fair
the
enough.
rest of the day is going. I just kind of go through in a bit of a haze. How about you?
I always like to start with a relatively low alcohol sort of Mosel Riesling
Oh,
or
nice.
something along those lines. And depending on how many of us there are, a magnum of that's always something quite special. But I think this year is not going to be as many of us that would require a magnum, so it might just be a regular bottle size this year. But I like to kick things off with a crisp, clean Riesling. Yeah, and then I'm quite traditional with the rest, so I'll go Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, I think, on the day. But one or two of these sweet wines might find their way as well onto my shopping basket.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Does anybody have any other thoughts at all? Otherwise, I think it's time for Gil and I to say thank you very much. It's our last event of the year.
Yes,
Certainly is, and
absolutely. Yeah.
my last event full stop as well. So thank you all very much for coming along, and lovely to see you all. Oh, start with a good English sparkling wine.
Oh, not a bad
Absolutely.
idea.
Perfect.
But
And thank you very much, Gil. That's been fabulous. And I will see you back in the office on Monday because sadly we
yeah,
haven't finished.
absolutely.
But to
Members,
all the rest of you, happy Christmas and thank you so much for joining us.
absolutely. Merry Christmas all.
Take care.